Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. I'm the Magi, and in case you haven't heard me say, we are living in unprecedented times. And no, I'm not talking about an illness threatening to destroy the world this time, but rather the fact that we have 20 full two-color starter decks at our disposal, even as starting out arena players. And well, that is unprecedented. We've never seen that many cards being offered at one time. And in this edition of Foundations Friday, we're going to break the rules a little bit. Since we do have all these cards, we're not going to stay Foundations agnostic. We're going to talk about the one, the only mono red. Which is a little bit of a misnomer because, of course, there's many different ways to build that. We're going to explore some of those today. And it really is kind of a ubiquitous tool here on Arena that almost always serves a purpose. And we're going to explore some different ways to approach that today. But before we get into all that, I'm sure you know that the 5-year foundation set in Standard is going to change a lot of things, not just in Standard, but in particular for budget and free-to-play players. What you may not know is you can make a big impact around here by making a funding choice through our Patreon, whether you're just helping keep the lights on every month, or you're making contributions towards specific content or hardware upgrades. Just know all the Patreon funding goes back into the community. Now, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, right. All right, so this is the entire mono red starter collection currently being offered on Arena. And as you can see, this is an awful lot of cards, and that gives us a lot of different opportunities and directions that we can take with this. The first one that I think is noteworthy is building a goblin deck. And just by sorting out here, you see there's an awful lot of goblins here. Once you were to add in some basic removal and things like that, you'd have about half a deck here. And if you were to position yourself as to pick up one of the Foundation's jump-in decks, unironically named Goblins, this deck practically builds itself, despite the fact that there's only 3 Goblin creature cards in this pack. It does, however, pack a Dragon Fodder as well as a Goblin Surprise, both of which I think are pretty essential non-Goblin cards, technically, in order to put this deck together. One of those 3 creatures is also going to be either a Dropkick Bomber, a Goblin Lord in its own right, or would give you a second copy of Krenko Mob Boss. And really, I don't think you want more than 2 in this deck, but really, even a full playset of Dropkick Bombers would be a nice addition from Foundations. Another direction that I think we could end up taking with this is a Spells Matter deck. And as you can see, we've got some cards that somewhat care about having cast spells and things of that nature, although we're certainly nowhere near the amount that you really want. I think the best direction, and probably the best budget version of an advanced mono red, would be to lean into the prowess aspect on that. And for that, you'd really want to add in cards like Monastery Swiftspear and the ubiquitous Monstrous Rage, which recently was determined to be so good that they just banned it in Alchemy. You're going to want full play sets on these cards. Just be aware that Monastery Swiftspear will rotate out of Standard at the next rotation. Still well worth having, and there are several different printings on this, even on Arena at this point. And personally, I like the older art, but to each their own. And of course, a third option for building a mono red deck in any of the classic styles, if you filter by the word damage, it's going to pull out all of those cards that either directly deal damage or care about dealing damage. And as you can see, there's an awful lot to work with here. and it still gives you quite a bit of room to potentially upgrade the deck and focus it. And in fact, if you were trying to break into other formats, this is one of the more basic options. And if you were looking at an eternal format like the coming midweek Magic event, you probably want to focus on red budget staples like the card draw offered by Light Up the Stage or the lightning bolt-esque punch of Skewer the Critics. Both of which are built on the spectacle mechanic, which allows you to cast these spells for a reduced casting cost under the condition that you have already dealt damage to your opponent that turn. Overall, I think this is the best day one mono red deck that you can build exclusively from the starter collection. As you can see, it's a pretty straight line here, just 20 lands. Let's get our creature count here, 18 creatures, and then of course that means we are going to be somewhere around 22 non-creature spells. So overall a pretty well-balanced deck, and these individual cards were selected because of the way they interact, as well as their ability to create value long-term in the game. And that's the way budget decks tend to win, is by creating more value by expending lower value cards. I took the liberty of pulling some footage from the archive of this mono red deck. We've got a pretty mediocre hand here. As you can see, there's nothing really special. But I've been getting about a 55-56% win rate with this deck, despite the fact that there's nothing particularly special about it. And obviously part of that win rate is experience piloting a deck like this. So if you are new to Magic, if you are new to Arena, or if mono red has just never really been your thing, don't be surprised if your results don't hit those peaks right away. It will take some time, some investment in order to get there. And of course, I'm talking about an investment of time, not necessarily other resources. So sit back, enjoy the show, and watch mono red do its thing here. And before we go, while every member of this community is important to me, I just wanted to take a moment and give a shout out to those patrons providing financial support and keeping the Stronghold from being a complete financial black hole. And of course, let me leave you with some suggestions for your next step here on the channel.